Homelessness. So I'm not quite sure that people are more disadvantaged by an electronic health record if you're homeless. I mean, I think there's lots of existing disadvantages. The question is, does it make them worse? And certainly very clear about people that are unregistered and the need to register them on systems. But once you are registered, I suspect actually the disadvantage becomes much less as the data becomes more transferable rather than a paper record. But forgetting that client group for a moment, not forgetting, but putting that aside, I can give you a few examples of how we have actually focused on vulnerable groups and actually made them less vulnerable. So one example of the benefit of what we've done locally in Redbridge is having taken up all the GP data and the hospital data and plugged it into one database and then done an algorithm on it, a risk stratification algorithm on which is publicly well rehearsed and known. What we found was that the top 1% of that population who were most at risk of going into a hospital on average saw their GP 16 times every year, on average had 2 hospital admissions every year, on average had 6 outpatient attendances every year, but didn't actually see a community health person at all. So none of those people, and we sampled 200 of them, actually had a community nurse come and see them. Nobody was care managing them in any sort of consistent, coherent way. Nobody was case managing all of their chronic disease, and so they were this person revolving around a system without their needs being met. So in the way, what we've done is identified the most vulnerable people in our society by undertaking a risk stratification. Take your point, they have to be registered to do it, but then we can actually invest resource and target resource in the right way to be able to keep that person healthy for as long as possible, and that's what we're working on at the moment.
I think one of the programs I've seen in one of the northern cities is in dentistry. I mean, this is a huge issue in this population group, and there's a proactive team that goes out and gets those people to come and have dental therapy. And I think, you know, that what they've shown in that study as well, which was I think part of the HSJ Awards a couple of years ago, is that if you can get them on the dentistry side, it sort of sucks them into the rest of the system a little bit.
It helps get to the root of the problem, doesn't it?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I think we must be getting near the end now. Do you want to go home yet, or do you want to listen to some more? Say some more. Some more? Or go home?
They don't commit. They will not commit.
It's like, I mean, I bet that none of these people in the room voted at all. You know?
Liberals.
All right, there was... I think we probably can't answer this question, but you never know who's an expert on this. Gaps in standards for data, I think, was the question, if I got that right. Yeah? Does anybody have a view on gaps, where they think there's gaps and where we need to bring standards in?
I think the professional bodies are trying to fill in some of the gaps. As you say, there's the technical standards and the common user interfaces, but I think some of the professional bodies are getting together to agree on what the standards for example, a discharge summary would be, or a medical summary would be. So we need to align the technical bits with the professional bits. But no, I think there's a move towards filling in and working towards.
Okay.
And the computer-generated interview. I'm not a fan, by the way, but I'm just throwing it in.
Yeah. Actually, on that point, just going back to the previous question, I just thought, you know, I don't know what's going to happen, but these pods, I don't know if you've seen them, that Cisco and people like that are putting out in the United States has been incredibly successful in the community, where you put a virtual clinic basically in a supermarket or in a store or in Boots the Chemist or something. And I think Tesco's are going to run some trials in this country soon. I think there's been a trial in Stoke-on-Trent in the UK where people can just wander into this cubicle and there's a screen and there's a doctor who will talk to you, he could be anywhere on the planet or on the moon or anything. But you can talk to a doctor, and there's all these things in there that you can use. Like if you've got a rash, you can photograph the rash and so on. But it may be that community might, you know, go and use those to sleep in or something at night. But, you know, it's really possible, I think.
They tried to roll those out in the north of Scotland, and the patients refused to use them because they thought they would lose their district nurse or whatever.
Oh, yeah. It is a big... But the United States, I mean, in the US, they've been a big success, as I understand it. But Cisco's had a problem rolling them out here. I mean, they're quite expensive for the UK market as well. I think that's the real reason in Scotland.
In terms of the data standards, I know I mentioned that CCD, the continuity of care document, which is similar to what you talked about for the emergency services record. That will be the common transaction, and it has kind of the core information. I always look at it really to answer the question you talked about. What does a physician need at 3 o'clock in the morning for an unconscious patient to be able to, just basic information. So there's medications, drug allergies, diagnosis, and a few other things. And it's outlined in an HTML or an an XML spec that is translatable. I've seen examples where people would write a CCD onto a jump drive, hand it to somebody who's using a different vendor's product, plug it in, it reads it, populates the record automatically. From our perspective, they're not the right behavioral health care extensions on that. We don't want to replace it because at least we got a standard, and I really would want to support that. So we're building behavioral health care extensions that include things that are specific to us, so that if I send it to a primary care doc, those extensions get ignored electronically. But if I send it to another behavioral health care professional, it'll populate their electronic record because it's information that's relevant to them. So like ICD-9 diagnosis versus the DSM system, which is what we use as an example of that. But that's one place where there's a hole for us. But I'm actually somewhat optimistic about this, because if we can get that standard established and not then customize it, which we have done in the States, a standard will be put out, and then everybody will say, well, we need to tweak it just a little bit. And that's the whole point of a standard. You don't tweak it. That's the standard. You know, imagine if your banks didn't, you know, your bank said, well, no, we really want to tweak that a little bit, so no, you can't get money out of your bank, but you know, only from ours. It's like, that's the whole point of the exercise, is that it's a communication vehicle. And so if they do that, I think we'll be in pretty good shape.
Just on that point, don't get on the wrong train in the UK with the wrong ticket, because you can go to Birmingham with 3 different companies, and if you get on the wrong train, they'll charge you again. While you're here.
So I'm Mr. Technology here in my hotel. They have a safe in the room, and the ones I've seen where you punch in a code, you know, have you seen these things where you can put a PC or a laptop or something? Well, this one uses your credit card, and that's okay. I'm not too worried about that. Well, but I didn't read the instructions. I put the thing in there, close the door. You're supposed to put your card in before you close the door so it can read your card. Now, the only thing that'll open it is the last guy that was in that room, whose card, some IPC and some traveler's checks are now locked away for posterity. I'm hopeful that the hotel has an override. That's my opt-out.
Okay. I think we're probably going to end up with probably one of the biggest questions, and then maybe open up for some more comments. Data ownership. I feel I'd leave it because you might be able to escape the back way. Yeah. So there's some pretty clear rules on data ownership nowadays, and of course they're quite inflationary in some sort of communities. But I mean, let's divide it again in terms of the patient record and also the test data situation, you know, blood tests and things like that, the data that comes into that. So could we have some commentary on where data ownership is today, and where do you think it should be?
Well, I'm just concerned, being a user potentially or abuser, is in data addition, and you know, I'm reminded by my 11-year-old son, who he asked me something. I said, "Well, look it up in Wikipedia," to which he said, "The teachers say we're not allowed to use Wikipedia because it's all corruptible." So he taught me something there. I noticed you made a lot of references to Wikipedia in the bottom of your talk. So you know,
data integrity has never been big for me.
And that thing from your talk about sort of adding information, and when you see something in print for some reason you believe it like a newspaper. Right. You know, the information you get out of something is as good as you put in, and I'm constantly having to mumble that mantra all the time, because you know, we get some printed letters from GPs that can be completely off the wall. Of course, you tend to believe it when it's in typed letters rather than in a handwritten letter. So I still share those concerns about the legitimacy of the information and who can add to it in a sort of Wikipedia-type manner.